We'll start today with that 30-day pause on Donald Trump's tariffs. Canada's 11th hour border security pitch, some old promises combined with some new ones, appears to have satiated the U.S. president for now. On top of the $1.3 billion border plan the feds laid out in December, the prime minister is now also pledging to appoint a quote-unquote fentanyl czar, to list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, and launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force aimed at organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. Trump's threat, however, isn't gone yet. That's prompting a rethink in this country on our dependence on the U.S. The Prime Minister convened a summit this week, bringing together leaders in business, trade, public policy, and organized labor.
We are in a moment that we have to meet for Canadians to see not just how we get through this particular challenge over the next 30 days or few months, but how we get through and thrive and grow stronger over the next 4 years and into what may be a more challenging long-term political situation with the United States.
François-Philippe Champagne is Minister of Industry. He joins us from that summit. Minister, it's good to have you back on the show. Thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very big day here in Toronto. I would say this is Canada's moment. As you said, you have business leaders, you have labor union leaders, Indigenous leaders. This is really Canada coming together to be more resilient, to be more ambitious, to present to the world a confident Canada, so that we can attract investment, diversify our economy, and make sure that in these uncertain times that we can restore confidence.
And I do think Canadians have been very comforted to hear that from politicians at all levels of government over the past few days in particular, and all different political stripes. I think they're also wondering if this is just rhetoric or if it will turn into more. And my question to you as Minister of Industry, someone who has led, been an integral part to developing this country's industrial and economic policy over the last number of years, is why are we only now talking about the kind of diversification you mentioned? Why did it take a crisis to get us here? And why should Canadians trust your government to implement something they could have over the past 10 years?
Well, the rules of the game has changed. I mean, that's what's happening over the last few days, or the last few months. I think Canadians realize that it's kind of a C.D. Howe moment. C.D. Howe, which was the Minister of Industry in 1945, which basically rebuilt the industrial landscape in Canada, where we say, making planes, making cars, making ships, bringing Canada into the modern industrial age. And I think it's kind of one of those moments where people say things that may have looked difficult before are now possible. Think about, we've been talking about bringing energy from one coast to the other, talking about how can we buy, what I've called a Canada First procurement policy, where we favor Canadian companies in public procurement, talking about a Canada Free Trade Agreement, talking about diversifying our industrial base, our export market, and why not our imports.
When you talk about, Minister, though, there being a C.D. Howe moment, and things that used to be difficult now have more public support, I mean, aren't governments supposed to do things even if they are difficult? Aren't governments supposed to see the advantage of diversifying, for example, trade markets? Because we were just as dependent during the first Trump administration. We went through the ups and downs of that, but we didn't see, the kinds of things that you're talking about implementing now.
Well, I would challenge you a bit. It's during our time that, for example, we signed these trade agreements. Now, Canada is the only G7 nation which has a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. This is a unique opportunity, but in order to seize the moment, to export to these markets, you need to bring Canada together. You need to bring labor. You need to bring businesses. You need to bring entrepreneurs. You need to bring our Indigenous people, because you can put the frame in place. But I think now what I feel, and the energy in the room, was this is Canada's moment. Now we can do it. We have the instruments to do it. But now, yes, we can try to export to other markets, and we're going to support our businesses. Yes, we can diversify our imports. Yes, we can invest in our competitiveness, in automation and robotization, to make sure that Canada would lead in the 21st century. Yes, we can do things different when it comes to natural resources or when it comes to permitting. We need to do the right thing, but at the same time, I think there's like this moment that we can do big things together and we can do them fast.
I want to ask you bluntly then, Minister, in that vein, as someone who does represent a riding in Quebec, if going forward you would be explicitly supportive in principle of a pipeline that goes west to east through Quebec?
I would say things have changed. I think Quebecers realize that the rules of the game have changed over the last few days. So you cannot be in the past. You need to look forward in the future. And that may need that we need to be able to have transmission lines that could bring electricity east-west. That may mean that you need pipelines that would go east-west. One thing that Canadians understand is resiliency. We cannot be dependent. We have these natural resources. We need to be able to export to markets. And you know what? I think people understand better now the nexus between energy security, economic security, and I would even say national security. And in that context, that's what we need to be doing together. And I would say, the worst we could do is to keep with the old rules when the rules of the game have changed. And this is a different time. This is a different moment. This is for us now to shape the future together. And that's really what this summit is about.
How far, Minister, is a government that you're part of, though, prepared to go to force the kinds of infrastructure you now say that there is public consensus around? And in particular, I mean something that goes, a pipeline that goes through Quebec. Yves-François Blanchet this week said we are fiercely opposed to any type of transport on Quebec territory of hydrocarbons from Western Canada to any market whatsoever. It does not serve Quebec. It does not serve the environment. It does not serve the planet. Even the Premier, though he talked about diversifying markets, reiterated he did not think that there was social acceptance for something like Energy East. Are you prepared to push that?
Well, we're going to be engaging. It's not about pushing, it's about explaining to people the new reality we live in. One thing I know about Canadians and Quebecers, they want to be resilient. They don't want to be necessarily dependent on any foreign nation in order to ensure their energy resiliency and security. So we're going to engage with people. This is not about forcing anything. It's about really engaging with people and say, you know what, the rules of the game have changed. This is a new world. We've seen it in the last few days. So in that context, you need to also take stock of that and say, you know what is the alternative? Do we really want to be dependent on a foreign nation? Or can we better serve ourselves, our citizens, our workers, and our communities by saying, you know what, let's do things right. Let's do things systematically, but at the same time, let's think big as well. And I would say this is not just about, like you said, bringing gas from coast to the other. It's also about transmission lines where you can bring electricity to make sure that you would decarbonize economies and sectors in other provinces. So my point is that at this point of time, the worst we could do is to exclude things. You need to put everything on the table, engage in a rational discussion, engage with the provinces, engage with citizens. And one thing that I hear is that people are willing to reconsider things. You know what? Because the world has changed.
I know your time's limited. Just one final question for you. I've spoken to a couple of people who were in the room for this summit who said that the Prime Minister was very frank about his interactions with Donald Trump. And he said that Trump's threat regarding making Canada the 51st state is a, quote, real thing. What does that mean?
Well, I would say Canada's a proud nation. Canadians are proud, and we will always stand up for Canada. Canada's sovereignty is not in question whatsoever. What we're going to do is to make sure that we engage with our U.S. partner and with mutual respect, making sure they understand the strategic nature of Canada. You know, I want to move from the friendly neighbor to the north to the strategic partner of choice that they have, and therefore we're going to stand strong. We're going to defend our workers and our industry, and we will always defend our sovereignty. And I think if one thing that they've seen in Washington is that they know that we can stand up for Canada, and no one should put in question the sovereignty of Canada.
Do you think he wants to annex Canada point blank?
Listen, my job is to remind them that, you know, no one can break the will of Canadian and the pride of Canadians and the sovereignty of Canada. This is not going to happen. And the way we can convey that message in Washington is by being strong, by being resilient, and by doing the things that we've just talked about. Because the more resilient we are, the more confident we are and the more prosperous we are. And I can tell you the tone has changed I've seen in Washington this week. They understand that if they want to make sure that they can have rebuild the industrial base of the United States of America, they'll need our energy, they'll need our critical minerals, they'll need the natural resources we have. And we're going to be talking with them as equal partner with respect. But at the same time, trust me, we've done that months and months. Again, they know not to mess with Canada. We're going to stand up for Canada at every step of the way.
Minister, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne.